building upon their deep dedication to bring unique products to the veteran and Second Amendment communities. The call to make a whiskey as bold as America was heard like an eagle's call. Leadslingers is a story about seizing opportunity when life throws it at you, while never forgetting where you came from. This is a story about men who pursue excellence. It's about freedom. It's about raising a glass to tradition, but also raising the bar of performance. This is the story of America, encapsulated in the story of 7 men with a vision. Leadslingers Whiskey is produced by 7 combat veterans. Driven by their love for America and fine whiskey, they crafted a whiskey that is enjoyable and unrepentantly supports the Second Amendment. By remaining active in their civilian and military communities, Leadslingers strives to set an example. Be proud of who you are. Be bold. No apologies. And that is why Leadslingers' name is devoted to the Second Amendment and all Americans who exercise it. Like those who stood at Lexington and Concord as the British tried to seize their arms and said no. You understand that freedom exists as long as you're willing to defend it. Like the men who tamed the West, you understand that you and you alone are master of your faith. Pursue happiness and terminate any who threaten your life or liberty. Leadslingers salutes you. America salutes you. Now pour a shot of boldness forged in the minds of battle-hardened patriots and enjoy.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Michael Schwartz with Gun Owners Radio. Gun Owners Radio broadcasts live every Sunday from 4 to 6 in San Diego County. You can hear us on 1170 AM. Or if you're not in San Diego County, you can hear us anywhere in the world if you go to youtube.com/gunownersradio. And if you want to see some of our past shows, you can go to gunownersradio.com. So the show's 2 hours. We interview people, have gear reviews, talk politics, talk guns, all kinds of really interesting things. It's a lot of fun. So check us out. And we started doing Gun Owners Radio Magnum, which is what this is. It's a more in-depth conversation with some of the most interesting people in the Second Amendment world. And today we have one of the most interesting people I get to interview. I'm not even going to give a huge introduction. We're just going to get into it because there's a lot to talk about. Seth Jahn, how you doing, man?
Hey, Michael. I really appreciate you having me on, sir, and thank you for that very generous introduction.
Well, I got to tell you, your resume reads like the script of a James Bond movie. I mean, it's pretty amazing. Security Intelligence Operations Specialist, Counterterrorism, Counterintelligence, Counter-poaching, Counter-human sex trafficking, U.S. military and law enforcement special operations vet, Team USA athlete. It goes on and on and on. You've been a professional fighter. You were on a SWAT team. Pretty amazing. My first question is: does it ever occur to you when you're walking around? Does it ever occur to you that, hey, I'm not a 9-to-5 suit and tie wearing guy. That you've gotten a couple of decades into adulthood and you have this amazing resume. Does it ever actually occur to you? Do you ever have that thought?
Look, I did those things, but I never said I was good at them. I don't have stories of heroism, man. All my stories of me getting my ass kicked all over the place and all over the world and actual heroes bailing me out. I've been so humbled and so fortunate to be part of some of those communities and some of the most selfless men and women that our country has to offer. Men and women who continuously put their lives on the line for people who don't even know their names, or for people that don't even know they're there most of the time. And it's a world that's really chock full of probably individuals who embody my favorite 2 qualities I find in anybody, and that's selflessness and humility. These are people who continuously make decisions at the detriment to their well-being in order to preserve freedoms and life. So it's been a hell of a ride, man.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And it started out you grew up in Florida, right?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah, I actually grew up in Panama City, just down the street from you there.
Yeah, man. I was 100 miles away from you. I grew up in Gulf Breeze, a small little island town there off the coast.
Yeah, I know Gulf Breeze. We had some friends over there. We used to go there a lot. And you grew up playing a lot of sports, especially soccer.
Yeah, sports was always a big part of my life. I pretty much played every sport. I moved down to South Florida in high school, and it was a real culture shock for me. But that's how you earned, respect, I guess, was just being, regardless of what your skin color was or anything like that, was if you could throw hands and if you could play ball. So I do remember one incident that really shifted the trajectory of my life, I would say. We didn't grow up with much money, and my sister and we went to a public school or a public swimming pool. We were enjoying, a swim there, and my sister was essentially getting sexually harassed, where they were grabbing her and by three older guys that, and keep in mind, her and I were the only representatives from our particular demographic, and so we never saw anything past that. But I remember the look in her eyes, and I was a skinny kid, and didn't have any training or anything like that, and I remember how helpless she looked, and she looked at me as if there was nothing that I would be able to do either. And I think I cried for maybe 2 nights. Like, it affected me in this really profound way, and I promised myself that I would never have anybody in my life look at me again like that when they were in need. So,
jeez, that must have had it. And it sounds like that story followed you throughout your career. It sounds like that feeling and some of the decisions you made as far as, what you did professionally.
I hate bullies, bro. And pretty much that's how I look at almost every single, TO or terrorist organization who I've fought against, whether it's Al Qaeda, Taliban, Hamas, Haqqani, Al Shabaab, Boko Haram, the list goes on. That's what they are. They prey on innocence. They prey on and exploit people that they perceive as weaker than them. And it's our responsibility. My favorite quote by Sir Edmund Burke is, "The only way for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing." And that's really driven me to not just say things, but to be a man of action.
So that outstanding, by the way. Thank you. So you said that it was a culture shock moving from North Florida to South Florida. Now, I know what you mean, but explain, moving from one part of the state to the other. What did you mean by it was a culture shock? What's the difference between the culture that you were growing up in and the culture that you moved to in high school?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I was in a mid to low class, demographic in Gulf Breeze up in the Panhandle. Is predominantly Caucasian. It's a beach town, so all I did was surf, play soccer, and I was in the water every day, fishing or diving or whatever. And then when I moved, it was the culture shock was in reference to I was never exposed to gangs. Gangs was a big deal where I was. I wasn't exposed to different minority groups, which my best friends growing up were all minorities. I grew up in minority neighborhoods, and there's some of the most beautiful, loving people that I've ever known. So it was just much different from what I experienced.
Was it? How did that affect you? What was the impact?
I've always said that I feel like people who have very bigoted ideas and views of the world are people who never leave their town. They don't expose themselves to other ways of other walks of life and other ways of life. The fact is, like, we can have meaningful discourse. We can have a respectful debates. You're never going to take the totality of people from all walks of life and think that we are all going to come to the same conclusion. But you have to open up that dialogue. You have to embrace each other's differences and then celebrate each other's differences. And nowadays, like as soon as you find out, oh, this person believes this person believes that, they have nothing of value to offer to the conversation. And that's a recklessly just naive and dangerous approach to any type of progress and unity.
And I found growing up playing sports, sports was an enormously diverse group of people. You know, you get exposed to every kind of walk of life. You know, someone from every community is playing some position on some team with you. And when you hit, I don't know, maybe you had a similar experience, but when you hit the field, it doesn't matter where they came from, you know, who they are, you know, what their last name is. It just matters, you know, are they going to be there for you? Are they going to play? Can they perform? Was that a similar experience?
Oh yeah, Mike, I absolutely love that analogy as well. And I've read a couple articles years ago on how America should use the military and sports locker rooms as a model for inclusion and diversity and how we approach it. Like we all come from different places in the country. We make fun of each other. We laugh at each other, and then we love on each other. Like, and we're a team. We have a one mission, and then we go and accomplish that. Nowadays, if you even say anything that's like a joke or you know, acknowledging a difference in somebody else, then you automatically, well, essentially cancel. Like you lose your job. You're called a fascist, a racist, a xenophobe, a misogynist, whatever. Like the list goes on and on and on. And it's really pathetic, that the whole cancel culture movement, and it's so corrosive to our country's ideals and values and all of our freedoms. So, in my humble opinion,
I was going to talk about it a little bit later, but that kind of happened to you recently. Not kind of, that happened to you recently, didn't it?
Yes, sir. Yeah. You know, I was the U.S. Soccer Federation were voting on a policy 604-1. I knew I was the minority in that. Like I wasn't going to be, it wasn't going to get turned over. But the 604-1 is prohibiting kneeling for the national anthem, and I respect their right, and I not only do, but I have fought for their right to express that freedom of speech if it's kneeling. I was just expressing why I believe it's misplaced and divisive, you know, and what caused so many people in an uproar. And I wish I probably would have reframed it a little bit, but I don't apologize for the message because it's all historically relevant and statistically sound in my position. And essentially what I said was, you know, we as athletes with millions and millions of followers that all of us have cumulatively refocus from slavery 200 years ago that a small percentage of our population was responsible for, and focus on the tens of millions of people, use our platforms to bring visibility to the tens of millions of people, more people enslaved now than at any point in history of the human trafficking trade, which is what I'm very passionate about. It's what I put my life on the line for monthly as a counter-human sex trafficking operative. And by stating that and being culturally or racially insensitive, I think it was, I've been labeled a racist. I've been canceled on almost every major left-leaning, you know, media outlet, and I'm very grateful for opportunities like this, or you know, the conservative outlets who at least give me a chance to give a clarifying statement or just you know, express some diversity of thought. You know, like what's so ridiculous about it is that my job is freeing slaves, and I am being called a racist. And I mean, my entire life has been dedicated to fighting for people if you want to relegate them to people of color, which is absolutely pathetic to me, all over the world. And I would do it again tomorrow. I come from a completely racially diverse family. Every race is in my family, and it's beautiful. And it's just sad to see. It's become something more than that, though. Once the conservative outlets got wind of it, a lot of support came rolling in, and I'm not even exaggerating, Mike. Like I've probably received between 6,000 and 7,000 messages, emails, over my social media, of people just saying thank you for just being bold in your convictions, not being afraid of this rabid mob that is coming for our individual liberties. And I would love to say this too. I would love to say the things you're saying, but I'll lose my job. I have a wife, I have a husband, I have children. I'll lose a promotion. Like, what kind of country are we living in right now, where people are afraid of expressing just diversity of thought? And I'm resolute in this fact, and it doesn't matter if you're black, gay, Hispanic, straight, Asian, white, and native, doesn't matter. Like, if you're a conservative, that's, in my humble opinion, the only mass discrimination is coming towards conservative voices. And so, again, it's evolved from something bigger than myself, in my opinion.
All right. So, do you tend to be conservative?
I've always described myself as a political centrist, but because there's absolute truths on both sides of the aisle. But in order to have any meaningful progress and any meaningful, a healthy exchange of dialogue, you have to be willing to accept different, positions and different, education and life experiences of what formulate this person's, perception. And again, I know I'm speaking in generalities here, but in this particular case, it is just so glaringly clear on who is infringing on our individual rights and liberties, and who wants individual freedom and liberties for everyone. And it's the support that I've received from the right has been overwhelming, and I'm so humbled by it. And the vitriol and the hatred I've received. My mother had surgery yesterday, has leukemia, and I believe she received 100 messages hoping that she dies on the surgery table for raising a racist. Like, what? Like, this is a level of psychosis that I've continuously experienced on that side. And I've worked in the sports realm for 6 years now, and 7 years almost. And I have beautiful relationships in very hyper liberal organizations. I am one of probably 1% of people there who have any type of position that differs, from their narrative and belief system. And we have great relationships, and these are people who already knew what I stood on, all these things. I've said the exact same things to them, and they still put out that statement because they're cowards and they had to bend to the mob mentality. And that's really scary, man.
Well, I when I first kind of read the headlines and started researching it and got into it, I'll be honest, my first thought was, I'm sure he said something dumb. That's always my first thought, is I'm sure he said something that he shouldn't have said, that should have been better thought out. But I read your statement, and I don't even see it, I don't see it as conservative or liberal or libertarian or even have any kind of political bent. And I just had a real hard time trying to figure out, what the attack was. I'm going to read a little bit of it. Seth, if any of this is out of context and there's some
nothing's off limits, my man, go ahead.
Okay. So, here's exactly what you quote. I keep hearing how our country was founded on the backs of slaves, even though approximately only 8% of the entire population even owned slaves. Every race in the history of mankind has been enslaved by another demographic at some point in time. Blacks have been enslaved. Hispanics have been enslaved. Asians, most recently in our country in the freaking 20th century, have been enslaved. Natives have been enslaved. Whites have been enslaved. Shoot, I lived in Africa for 2.5 years, where I could purchase people, slaves, between the price of $300 and $800 per person, per head, depending on their age, health, and physicality. Where were the social justice warriors and the news journalists there to bring their ruminations to these real atrocities? And yet, in all of history, only one country has fought to abolish slavery, the United States of America, where nearly 400,000 men died to fight for our abolishment of slavery underneath the same stars and bars that our athletes take a knee for. Their sacrifice is tainted with every knee that touches the ground. Seth, I don't see why you got any kind of backlash, let alone the degree that you got. What if you could rephrase it or maybe paraphrase it, what did you mean to say in your statement? I think you said it well, but if you were to paraphrase it now, if someone were unclear, What did you mean to say in that statement? What point were you trying to get across?
Two points on that, and I appreciate the question, Mike, is I in no way, the one thing I would have clarified more, that I would have emphasized more, is that in no way do we ever forget or minimize the slavery, regardless if it was a small percentage of our population. Is something that should be in our history books. It's something we should continuously learn from. My call to action was what I was trying to emphasize was that you're taking a knee for a flag that was responsible for freeing the very people you're saying you're advocating for, and that just makes absolutely no sense to me. And you did isolate the most provocative statement in that speech, and that's where I received. I mean, I've been canceled from it. I've lost thousands and thousands of followers. I've lost all my upcoming jobs, my sponsors. My mother's gotten tons of death threats, like I said. My friends, people who are loyal to me, have received vitriol and hatred just for supporting me or liking a post. I've had, some pretty famous guys that I'm friends with who we support each other, and they've done complete articles just for them liking a post of mine a year ago. And you can scroll down my Instagram, and it's years and years of me side by side with people of color, fighting for people of color, for advocating and for bringing visibility to their plight, and all that's just completely disregarded because of the vapid approach to what this mob mentality, this cancel culture, this pervasive cancel culture is to our society. And I've become, I'm never going to pull the victimhood card, but I've experienced it, and I've always been sympathetic to it. When people would come to me and say, "Seth, I've been shadow banned, I've been canceled, I've been censored, or whatever," and that's very real. And I was always very sympathetic. I was like, "Man, I'll do whatever I can for you, of course." But once you experience it, once you experience how bleak this movement is, and my level of empathy increased exponentially. Like, I've come to a place where I have nothing to lose now, and that's what's kind of fueling my fervor in really illuminating how precious our individual freedoms are.
Well, I read on Yahoo News just a simple sentence. Paralympian Seth Jahn was removed from the U.S. Soccer Athletes Council on Sunday after he made a racist speech in support of the infamous anti-kneeling rule, which was officially repealed on Saturday. Now, they're just kind of describing what happened, but what hit me in that sentence is, I think a lot of people, Seth, see you, in an article, they see you, posing and in a picture or whatever, and it's easy to detach from that. Most people can't relate to, people wanting to post their picture and have them pose, and they're an athlete, they're a warrior. A lot of people, it doesn't feel like you're a human being. It feels like you're a character on a TV show, and I think there's a certain amount of detachment from that, and combine that with this journalist, whoever wrote this, who's a journalist. Quote unquote, he made a racist speech. It wasn't even, he made a speech that some people consider racist, or he made a speech that, that some people are worried may be perceived as racist. They labeled it right there. This journalist, whoever wrote this, Yahoo, and this wasn't an op-ed. This was supposed to be a straight line news report, just said, you made a racist speech, period, end of story. And you, as a real person, not a character on a TV show, what's it like when somebody with a national level reach calls you a racist? What is that feeling?
The first, it's weird because I wasn't mad at first. I was just like, the first sentiment I had, not to be corny, was sad at seeing that something like this is allowed in our country, not just for me, but for so many people who I've known who have experienced similar situations. But that's the default. Whenever you say anything that disrupts the narrative, they pull the indefatigable, he's a racist, because we don't have a counter to the points that he just illuminated. And I think it's just egregious. I mean, this is terrible that they have that type of, and but I always implore people, like, look at the sources on these, look at, these are 24, 25-year-old rich, white, woke, liberal, people right out of, their master's degree in the higher educational institution who now have, this is who is one person who is publishing this, with their own belief system. And now we all, instead of being critical thinkers and questioning everything, we're all like, we read something like that and we're like, yes, like, that's just, you can't do that. You have to take in the totality of the information before you make a command decision on anything, whether it's from anybody, especially with the lack of journalistic integrity nowadays. Everything is exploiting the emotive state of their audience in order to garner ratings, and it doesn't matter how true or how false that statement is. And it's really sad to see. So
this happened a year ago, just about a year ago, just over a year ago. Has this changed anything? Has this changed the way you think about anything related to race relations or anything, or just to, I guess, maybe play devil's advocate? Has it maybe made you rethink things about race issues, or no? You feel like, hey, I have a solid understanding and empathy, or tell me a little bit about that.
So this didn't happen a year ago. This happened a week ago.
Oh, my bad. Sorry. Well, I'm looking at
no.
A week ago. Sorry.
Yeah, so it's still fresh, man, and I'm still feeling the repercussions of it. Like I said, I've lost pretty much all of my upcoming jobs, and it's not because they don't support me. They do. They support the message, and they're like, man, we're gonna find something for you. But everything that I do, I work in either a clandestine or undercover capacity. And we can't risk the mission, especially when it comes to little children's lives. And I would make the same exact decision that they are. So, anyways, has it changed my? No, I'm not, because I hate bullies, and I don't care. That's what I articulated earlier. I know that there's injustices across this entire world. It's not just an American issue. This is a humanity issue for me. And once you've lived in it, you're immersed in it. You see that underworld and that criminal world. Of just how evil it is. These trivial, things don't matter as much, and all it has done is made me more resolute in my mission to be a voice for people who feel like they don't have one anymore.
So you got, I think, as a result of this, you got picked up by Turning Point, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Talk about that. What will you be doing for Turning Point?
Yeah, they asked me to become an ambassador for them. I really love because, as somebody who's been involved with, again, the higher educational institutions for years, I've been, I don't know, to 9 different universities throughout my adult life, witnessing firsthand how the social programming that is rife within the educational institution is absolutely nauseating to me. If you exercise any diversity of thought, then your grades are reflective of that, and there's no promotion of critical thinking. It is straight up what I would describe as gray agitative propaganda, and this is something that I was paid by our U.S. government to be a subject matter expert in, and so what Turning Point does is offer a different perspective for students that aren't subjected to any other narrative, and with a big promotion on our individual liberties and our freedoms and all of that. So
I think that sums it up perfectly what they do. I've actually given a couple of talks on campuses in California about the Second Amendment. And they at the invite of Turning Point, and I'll tell you, they are, come one, come all. We don't care, what you look like, who you are, what your background is, what your beliefs are. Gather. Let's talk about it. Let's be respectful. I think that they're doing really, really good work. It's kind of, it seems like if you go back to the '60s. It seems like we've done a complete 180, with what they were fighting for on campuses in the '60s and the hippie movement and what they're fighting for now. It's done a complete 180. It's like all the people It's almost like sometimes it feels like the hippies that were fighting in the 60s, have taken over and are
Mhm.
now just as guilty of what they fought against back in the 60s. And now, it seems like the right, the right side of the spectrum is having to go back and fight for their, their freedoms and liberties. I don't know. What do you think of that?
Oh no, I agree implicitly, my friend. What you just kind of spoke on reminds me of something I read not too long ago, a book by former Special Agent Leon Skozik called "The Naked Communist," and he outlines 45 points. And even if you don't read the book, just go look up the 45 points of the Naked Communist. And it was written, I want to say, in the 50s. Now, there's some things that are focused like on the nuclear proliferation stuff and some of the concerns of that time, but he outlines how that movement will take hold in our country. And it is the radical left targeting the media, targeting the educational institution, and targeting our entertainment. And that is exactly what we're seeing happening, and they're taking over our culture because of it.
There's definitely been a lot of, I'm just generally a lot of strife, social strife, maybe is the best way to phrase it, in the last 10 years. Do you think it's getting worse? Is it getting better? Are we seeing, some kind of settling, or what do you think the next 5 or 10 years is going to look like?
What I would implore everybody to do is get away from the mainstream media, because all that they survive off of exploiting isolated incidents and exacerbating them into this and spinning it as if it's that's the case throughout the country. And every single one of your viewers, I guarantee, when they just go out into the general public and they're around everybody, doesn't matter which race or creed or whatever, everybody gets along pretty well. You know what I mean? I know, again, I'm speaking in generalities, but that's for me the reason why we have those feelings and those sentiments are and this is my humble opinion, is solely because of the vulturistic approach of the media.
Wow. This is a deeper talk than I thought I was going to get. Is this something obviously you've thought a lot about it in the last week or two here, but let's talk about why. It sounds like you have some very deep and well thought out opinions in general on a lot of these subjects, and let's talk about why. First off, let's go way back. Let's go way back. When you were growing up or you were in high school, what did you want to be? You have all this on your resume. Your resume's, like I said, looks like a movie script. What did you want to be when you were in high school?
Really all I cared about being was a professional athlete. When everybody else was playing, when all these kids were partying, I smoked weed before in my life until last year, actually. That's a whole nother conversation. But
let me tell you, take it from another Floridian, growing up in Florida and never having smoked weed is an accomplishment in and of itself.
Yep.
I think you and I might be the only two, but wow.
It is, man. Yep. So and the reason why I even tried was I had a couple of Navy SEAL buddies. We were injured about the same time together in Afghanistan, and I was speaking I had a speaking engagement in Texas with Alan West and a couple of years ago, and they had they were pushing a THC product, and I was hey man, how you guys doing? And they're like, yeah, feeling better than ever. I was like, really? I love hearing that. And they said, I've thrown away all my prescription meds. Whenever I'm having pain management issues or sleep issues, I'll take some of our product, and it just really reformulated like my position on all that stuff. And after I tried, I was like, man, like I'm never gonna be out there pushing drugs or anything like that. But I slept better than I have in my since my injuries. A lot of those issues were neutralized, and I was really impressed. So
all right. So you wanted to be a professional athlete. What made you enlisted in the Army?
Yeah, I got away from that. So I when I was growing up, when everybody's out doing their thing, like I was training. Like that's all I was running, I was training, I was working out. I was trying to hone my craft, and everything. One of another favorite quote of mine is, everything worth having requires sacrifice. Whenever everybody says they want to have something or want to do something, but whenever it's time to put the work in to achieve that or to accomplish that, they find the path of least resistance, or they quit. And for me, I've never settled for mediocrity in my life, and that's what kind of continued to drive me to pursue that route. So when to transition into your follow-on question, I didn't have any inclination of going into the military or government or law enforcement or any of these things that I've done. I just wanted to be an athlete, and when I signed pro, I remember the moment. Actually, it was a home game. We were playing a really big club. I think we had 35,000 people in the stands, and I was at that point a 20-year-old, cocky punk ass kid, man, and I walk in this stadium. I'm like, yeah, I did it, because I came from nothing, man. Like, I was like, I did this, I made it, and then I started looking in the faces in the crowd, and I just got a most sickening feeling in my stomach. I felt like a pet monkey or a court jester, or people are paying for me to entertain them. And then they leave that stadium and go do real meaningful things with their lives and make a difference in the world. And I'm kicking around a ball to define my life. And now I also want to, because I've been checked on this, I've said comparable things in the past. I know a lot of athletes do tremendous good with their platforms, and I don't want to minimize that either. This was just my path in my immaturity at that point, and what kind of drove me in my decision making. I just didn't want to kick around a bag of air to define my life, and I wanted to be in a service oriented career field. So I joined the military.
Wow! So you enlisted in the Army, and talk a little bit about your Army career. You ended up doing. Ended up in the U.S. Army's 20th Special Forces Group Airborne. What was your career path in the Army? You enlisted, went to boot camp. Is it called boot camp?
Basic training. Yeah.
Basic training. Sorry, I know. I don't want to.
I think boot camp Marines. So.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to mess that up. I don't want a bunch of Marines yelling at me and a bunch of Army guys yelling at me. So you went to basic training, and then what was your career path in the Army that led you to the Special Forces Group?
Yeah. I'll be honest, when I first joined the Army, I really wasn't too impressed with my unit. I thought that the leadership wasn't what it could be. The training wasn't adequate. It was more of a dog eat dog than a brotherhood. And I'm still great friends with a number of guys in that unit. But now there are tremendous conventional units across the country. I mean, awesome units, awesome guys. This was just my experience as a young kid, and again, I've never settled for mediocrity in anything in my life, and I had an opportunity to go over to 20 Special Forces Group, and it was a good fit for me because it's a Guard SF unit, and it allowed me to pursue another career. So that's when I went into law enforcement. So I was a full-time law enforcement officer. I got on the SWAT team after my first year. So back in the military, on that piece of it, I did 3 deployments, and in 2010, October 20th of 2010, I was injured while sustaining, supporting combat operations in Eastern Paktia province. It was a joint task force with SEAL teams and Special Forces ODAs, as well as CIA, a contingent as well. And that night really again shifted the trajectory of my life as well. I was diagnosed with traumatic brain injury, 5 spinal cord fractures, peripheral femoral phrenic nerve damage. So I was a hemiplegic for essentially a year and a half. The first 2 teams said, don't expect to be able to walk again. The third team of doctors told me that, you'd probably be able to walk again, but only with an assisted device. And it's just something that I refuse to hear. And I've seen so many, and I hope your listeners kind of take this piece from it, because I know a lot of people, injury is injury and illness is illness, regardless of the mechanism of injury. And I know a lot of people are struggling with this, or have people or loved ones that are struggling with sickness or physical, injuries, is to stay mentally healthy. I saw so many examples of after living in a hospital for a year and a half of guys who had, less severe injuries, but had just thrown in the towel. They hoisted the white flag, and their healing and recovery was completely stagnant. Whereas individuals who had far worse injuries were mentally healthy. They were motivated. They were grateful for an opportunity to heal and recover, and their recovery was exponentially faster. And I have so many examples of that, and so many tremendous examples of just fortitude, personal fortitude, and grit of guys who just, and gals who just refuse to quit. And if nothing else comes of this, I hope that people who are struggling just can encourage their loved ones to just stay positively, mentally positive.
Geez, man, there's no slow setting on Seth, right? I mean, like, you're just going 100 miles an hour. So just to recap, you're a professional soccer player at 20, right?
Mm-hmm.
And is there money, before we can go for it, is there money in professional soccer? I don't mean like this one or two superstars, but is that good money when you're 20 years old and you're playing professional soccer?
It depends on which league you're playing in. I want to say like 7 of the top 10 highest paid players in the world are soccer players. But I would describe myself as a mediocre at best pro. So I would have had a pretty not a very noteworthy professional career, I guess, and I think that also played a factor as well. I came to a place where I was like, you know what, I've reached a goal to become a professional athlete. Now let's go do something else, and that's going to make a bigger impact on this world. And
and I think that's amazing. It's kind of Pat Tillman-esque. Are you a fan of Pat? Did you ever meet him?
He's a really controversial guy. He's his just incredible sacrifice, and I know other guys as well. I can't throw their names out there who are pro athletes who are talking about taking the same exact path, and they, I just admire him on so many levels. Pat Tillman, as far as, he gave up millions of dollars, and that's something that really I related to, because I was never been driven by money. Most of the things I've done were volunteer, or I was losing money doing it. It's just because it was something that I was passionate about, and that's what drove his decision making as well. And yeah, he's somebody who should be admired and revered, because we have. It's funny, again, going back at the same point that I made with the journalists. Like, I don't understand how kids and adolescents look at professional athletes and celebrities or actors who are pretending to be somebody for a living, who are entertainers. And again, I'm not trying to minimize the choices they made in their life, but they are no means subject matter expert on anything policy related, on who to vote for. But yet people defer to them because of their public profile, and that's just completely, again, reckless. Like, you need to defer to subject matter experts, of people who live it, who breathe it, who have seen these things in action, and that's who, you're not going to go to a painter if you're having a backache. You're going to go to the same thing with athletes. Like, it's time to exercise a little more critical thinking, and I hope a lot of the kids, if there are any listening, that's something that they'll start to implement as well. And that's something I want to really advocate for with TPUSA, going into some of these universities where we idolize all the wrong people for all the wrong reasons. All the people who are truly living a selfless life and making this world sweeter, are educators, are men and women of service, from fire to law enforcement to military to men in STEM, in sciences, people who are trying to find vaccines. Like, these are people who need to be, and there's always some level of admiration, but these are people who need to be celebrated, and these are people who need to be put on those pedestals to tell us what we think from a non-political bias perspective.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think so. I don't think it doesn't sound like you're trying to denigrate actors. It just sounds like you're trying to exalt people who are subject matter experts, like you said.
Absolutely.
So, okay, so you're 20, you're a professional soccer player. You wanted to live a more fulfilling life for your personal decisions. you become a police officer, and you're in the U.S. Army's 20th Special Forces Group. You get sent to the Middle East, and you're severely injured to the point where most of the experts that you spoke to, most of the medical professionals that you spoke to, said that you'll never walk again, or at the very least, you'll barely walk ever again. And instead of that getting you down, you went ahead and climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and fought professionally in a Muay Thai tournament. Is that accurate?
More or less. Man, I'm not sure where you're getting these things. Honestly, right after, when I was in the hospital, I ended up having an opportunity to go into the intelligence community. So I actually became a counterintelligence special agent after my military service.
So you rehabbed and you started walking again. You pushed yourself real hard, and then went into into military intelligence.
No, not necessarily military intelligence, but I was working for the government, and as a badge and credentialed counterintelligence special agent. I was working primarily in Europe, but my area of operations was it transitioned quite a lot. But I was injured again. I was hit by a Katyusha rocket in 2014, and I had a punctured lung, ruptured eardrum, another mild traumatic brain injury. So not nearly as bad, but bad enough where I was at that point, over the last dozen years have been eat, sleeping, breathing warfare in some capacity, and I just needed to get away from it. And that's what kind of I've always been involved with combat sports. That story about my sister and I at the pool, I got into boxing right after that, and I developed my hands, and that's what, all that I knew is preparing for another situation like that. So anyways, I've always been involved with MMA and BJJ and things like that. So I moved to Thailand. I lived in a small hut, and I didn't even have a phone with me. I fought. I would train 2 times a day with Dragon Muay Thai. That was my gym. I'd fight every few weeks. I'd donate all my fight proceeds to an elephant sanctuary and a tiger rescue that I was volunteering at. And that's what really, and I did that for 10 months. I even had a pet elephant, actually. I had a little baby elephant. And she was incredible. I loved her to death. What a personality. But
wait. So how does that happen? I mean, even if tomorrow I decided I was going to go live in a hut and train, in Muay Thai in Thailand, how does that even happen? Like, how did you make that transition or that leap or whatever it is?
Everything. That's the thing is whatever you want to do in this world, all it takes is just saying yes, and dispensing with the excuses. That's what hinders people from achieving their goals and their dreams and their aspirations. Is you can talk yourself out of about anything. And so when I moved to Thailand, I wasn't planning on staying there. I just wanted to take a couple weeks, but I fell in love with the way of life. It was very reminiscent, kind of nostalgic to my Gulf Breeze days. I lived in Phuket. It's a small little island town, and really diverse, people from all over, like beautiful people, great food, and so it really wasn't.
You're in a hut and have a pet elephant.
Yeah, I just wanted to live really simply. I wanted to get away from all the distractions of everything that just weighs so heavily on all of us, news and media and all these, social media and all these things. And so at the base of the mountain where I lived, there was an elephant farm. That's what I call it. And they took really poor care of the elephants. I think they had like 45 elephants, and there's this little baby that was chained to this tree. And I remember, I had a little motor scooter, and I would, I'd drive by her every morning on my way to the gym. And then in the afternoon, after my last session, there she was. She's still chained to this pole. And so it was so bad that after like a week of this, I'm sparring, in the gym, and I'm getting my head kicked in, and I'm thinking about this little baby elephant. So I was like, man, I got to do something. So I went to the local municipality, got the licensing for her, and I think I bought her for like, I don't know, it wasn't crazy, like maybe 50,000 baht, which sounds like a lot, but just a couple $1,000s. And built a little enclosure. We had a beautiful view of the Ottoman Sea from where I lived on the mountain, and I just walked her up the hill, and it was just me and her. And I'd come home, and she'd come galloping towards me, and 350 pounds flop in my lap. But yeah, it was pretty cool. I ended up donating her to an elephant sanctuary over there when I left.
Wow. Well, you really truly are one of the most positive people I've ever met. I'm just a couple minutes ago when you said, yeah, I got, blown up by some rocket shrapnel, and then followed up with, but it wasn't as bad as, my last, geez, that's amazing.
We all have different capacities for trauma, I suppose. And it's just about how we roll those punches,
So so you also, as if all this wasn't enough, you also were a professional at anti-poaching and counter-human trafficking, both those in Africa?
So when I was working or when I was kind of volunteering in Thailand, it brought a lot of visibility to the poaching trade and how just evil that is as well. And when I had an opportunity to go to Africa, I just jumped on it. Again, not making hardly any money at all. A lot of it I was coming out of pocket for, but I learned so much every day because I was living in the bush. I wasn't living in a city. We had a team house, but we were embedded with Venda tribe as well, and did a lot of if we go over there with our American arrogance and think that we're going to out bushcraft the Bushmen in Africa, then again we're recklessly naive. So how you do that is by developing those intelligence networks, formulating those personality matrices and those link diagrams and those activity matrices that paint a very clear picture of the criminal syndicate that is polluting that region. And I was really taken back because it evolved into not just a counter-poaching mission, but a counter-terrorism mission as well. As 40% of Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram's operational funding comes via poaching. The two most valuable commodities in the world, African rhino horn and pangolin scale, the most highly trafficked animal in the world. And so and that's what again I evolved into to human trafficking, because once you're tapped into that black market, you have a cover for action, a cover status, cover conversation, all those different things. I was purchasing things off the black market and to a point where I'm, able to buy people. And there's a thriving slave trade in Africa. 20.3 million people are enslaved in Africa, 40.3 million in approximately in the entire world. And so again, that brought visibility to that mission, which I'm extremely passionate about. That's what I've kind of dedicated my life to now.
So that's what you're doing now, I think you said that the attention a week ago has kind of disrupted that part of your career. Is that?
Yep, it's something I was never vocal about, obviously, because I have kind of I'm not a famous guy by any means, but I have enough of a platform where it's not something that I can say openly that I do, because I work in an undercover capacity. But with all the visibility that came with me from the leftist mob, calling for my head and calling me a racist on almost every media outlet, I lost my ability to go and rescue people who are enslaved throughout the world, and that's probably the thing that infuriated me the most of everything.
They canceled a person whose job is literally and actually ending slavery in Africa, and so you can no longer do that part of your job. That's insane. That's mob mentality. That's not logic. That's not that doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, and that's why I've become so passionate in taking this fight to a greater capacity, because I don't want to see this happen to not just, again, it doesn't matter. I don't have a wife and kids, not with a face like this. I have to, I have nothing to lose. And so, if throughout the entirety and throughout the spectrum of eternity in our, as far as humans' existence, we've always had some semblance of good and evil. And the only reason why you have that balance of good and evil is because men and women who elected the side of good also elected to be men and women of action. Not just talk about it, but to take action. And so when I see the scales tip in one particular direction that is just a complete infringement on our individual liberties, I'm ready to take a fight to them on a front they're not prepared for.
You know, that's a really good transition to what I want to talk about next. You've been all over the world and you've done some pretty amazing things and seen some pretty amazing things. You're a gun guy. You definitely. I've seen pictures on your Instagram. You're definitely a gun guy. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yes, sir. Absolutely. I'm a big advocate for our 2A, man.
So I've made the assertion many times that if you look, it's really only been, what, 10,000 years of human history. It's really only been about the last 250 years that a person has truly been, any person, any individual has truly been able to effectively defend themselves. And that 250 years is the 250 years where a portable firearm is possible. And especially in the last, 50 years or 100 years, where a firearm is truly portable. Anyone can carry a firearm, which means that anyone can effectively defend themselves, whether they're a 90-pound woman against a 300-pound Navy SEAL. It used to be that, and in many parts of the world, it still is very much like this, but it used to be in human history that the biggest, toughest, meanest guy, the most evil person in the village, got whatever he wanted. But now people can truly, truly defend themselves. And I don't think it's a coincidence that that same time period, that small sliver of human history where people could effectively defend themselves, that same time period is when we saw advancements in rights for LGBT, advancement in rights for minorities and women. That's not a coincidence. I think that that's a cause and effect. Now, you've seen a lot of things. You fought for against a lot of bullies. What do you think of that assertion?
Yeah, I love it, man. This is, I've done a number of training courses for a lot of women in my life, people who I care dearly about, and even people who I don't know. And just seeing these are people whose husbands are working in, on business or whatever the case is, and seeing how empowered that they become by exercising their Second Amendment is one of the most telling things for me, I suppose. I actually just posted this on Instagram today. As a matter of fact, in my stories, it was a Dave Chappelle quote on the First Amendment is first for a reason, and the Second Amendment is just in case the first one doesn't work out.
Yeah, I remember saying that. Yeah,
and I absolutely love that. I'm sure these are things that you've covered multiple times, but it's just such common sense, like with all these ridiculous gun laws that are being proposed. If these laws work so well against the criminal element, then why is there such a pervasive drug trade or human trafficking trade, $150 billion industry a year? The only people the only demographic that those type of laws affect are law-abiding people, and now you're taking away their ability to protect themselves against those who dismiss laws altogether. Like, is again just absolute common sense. So to give you a little bit of illumination based on like my personal experiences in Africa, for example, and we'll say South Africa and Zimbabwe, all these countries I'm very familiar with, I would work very closely with the local law enforcement as much as I can, because there's such a high corruption rate. But because of that, these communities form security groups to protect themselves. And if you've never looked up the farm murders and how prevalent they are throughout South Africa and all of Southern Africa, to be honest with you, give that a scroll. And so one of my jobs was to serve as a QRF, a quick reactionary force, in the event of a farm murder attempt from these people who are living in the bush. They're out, away from any type of support. And the modus operandi for almost every single one of these farm murders attempts was, and I know this might get a little graphic, but it's real talk and it needs to be said, is You'd have a family who usually they'll have some type of insider threat that will give that information to this criminal element. They usually worked in about 5 to 7 man teams. They'd come into the house, hold the family hostage. The father usually had telemetry to anything of value on his property, whether that's rhino, elephant, for their ivory or for rhino horn, and also guns. And keep in mind, I'm saying this because South Africa and Zimbabwe, they have some of the strictest gun laws in the world, yet some of the most the highest gun violence. So again, these laws only affect the people who are law abiding. So they would go into these homes, take the family hostage. They would go out to the bush, butcher the rhino or the animal, take its tusk or ivory, come back to the house. The women and children, as well as infants, be raped and killed in front of the father. The father be killed as well. They take all their guns and leaves. And it is every single case that I looked at, I think it was maybe 30 to 40 were all exact same. And these are people who have essentially had their ability to defend their homes and their properties taken from them, and left them vulnerable to criminal elements who hold no value when it comes to human life, much less animal life.
That is so enormously brutal and evil. I don't even think it sinks in. When I hear those stories, I think a lot of people, when we hear a story like that, it's so beyond human that it's hard to even comprehend what you just said as real. And
it's horrific. You're absolutely right. And this is the thing, is why I've become so much more outspoken on it, is once you've lived it, once you've experienced it, man, like you're like, my gosh, like we cannot forfeit these rights, it's you're never gonna, you're always going to have evil. That's part of human nature. That's just going to be part of the human experience. But we also have a right to be able to defend ourselves effectively. So.
And you really think when you come back to the States, and reflect on the parts of Asia where you lived, and Africa, and the Middle East where you served, do you really think that? Does it occur to you? Is it something that you think about, that, man, not necessarily just the Second Amendment, but the Second Amendment and, the First Amendment and all the things that the government was designed to protect, not regulate, but protect.
Yeah.
Are you ever sitting there, having a drink and it just kind of sinks in that, man, these other countries, they have no idea how bad it is and how good it is because of our freedoms. Does that ever actually happen?
Oh, absolutely. So I've been to 98 countries throughout my career. I've lived in 9 of these countries. I've all that's done. I've been tremendously grateful for those experiences. They're invaluable. They say traveling is the one thing you can spend money on, and it makes you richer. And that's definitely held true for me. But it's also made me so incredibly grateful to live in this country and to have the freedoms that we have, to have the abundance that we have, to have the opportunities that we have. I'm just these America hating individuals who are always condemning every single action in our, if you look for the negative, you're going to find it. These are people who have never experienced these other walks of life, so I've been very reflective on those things and very grateful for them, and all it's done is illuminated how fortunate I am to live here. And I also want to say too, like,
sure,
when I was coming up through the educational institution, because of the social program, this is what I was continuously subjected to. I was very liberal. I was kind of the antithesis of all the things that I'm advocating. But once you have that life experience, once you travel, once you work in these capacities, once you see these policies fail time and again all throughout the world, it's brought me so far to the center, to the right. It's just changed my life tremendously in that regard.
So you're saying when you got out of high school, you felt like you were politically left of center?
Yeah, I would say so.
Is there anything in particular? Like is there a particular policy that you remember when you were, supporting when you were 18, 19, 20 that now, you're in your late 30s and you have an amazing career behind you that you don't have that same view?
I wouldn't say one in particular. I would say just the general totality of it all. I was force fed this narrative of these people need to be taken care of, and the governments are that's who does that, and free this, free college. When you're a kid, that's what you continue to hear, and you realize that nothing is free. We're all paying for that, all the tax paying citizens. So, yeah.
Wow. And so traveling the world, doing what you did for the military and for the government, and then, doing what you did in Africa, that you feel like those experiences are, changed you for, politically and the way you view human nature even.
Mm-hmm. It's made me that much more of an advocate for underprivileged people and how they're being spoon-fed the wrong message, in my opinion, after experiencing these different policies and that are very comparable to what the left is trying to push on our country.
So what's the message what's the wrong message that they're being given?
Well, man, oh gosh, this is going to be super controversial. I hope I'm going to get a lot of hatred and you're a racist again comments for this all over the place. But I just had this conversation with one of the staff members on the U.S. Soccer Federation, because again, they called me and they're like, man, we know this is all BS. I'm so sorry you're going through this. But they are all hyper liberal, and they said, but what's your stance on BLM? And I was just like, well, if I am truly an advocate, if I want to see these communities not only survive but to thrive, I can't be an advocate for BLM, and this is why. This is kind of bleeds over into your question, Seth, as well, is when I look at all the demographics throughout our country, I'm a facts and statistics kind of guy now. I take in all the data and then I make a decision. I look at Hispanics, I look at natives, I look at Asians, blacks, whites, all of these who experience similar socioeconomic plights, right? Well, there's one denominator from all those, and yet that particular demographic is responsible for a disproportionate amount of violent crime, of all of that. Why is that? There's one denominator that's so glaring compared to the rest of those demographics, and that's the 78% fatherless rate in that community. And so when you have an organization that's calling for the dissolvement, the Black Lives Matter calling for the dissolvement of the nuclear family, in my humble opinion, the one thing that is truly prohibiting them from flourishing as they very well could be and should be, is that statistic. And so if I truly care about these communities and I truly love these people, and my best friend's a black guy, we've had the same conversation, and he's funny, when all these reports came in, he's like, hey man, we've been best friends for about 10 years, 11 years now. Why'd I have to find out through the media that you're a raging racist? So anyways, but so for me, like when I look at, also when I went to go support some of these organizations, when you click on that and it goes to Act Blue, so these going to political campaigns, man. Like when you go to those websites, last year, it's crazy, and I don't understand how people don't take in again the totality of that information and just.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I just want to recap what you just said. You basically you just said that a major problem in our country today is kids growing up without a father. What a major problem that is.
No accountability there. Yeah.
And that African Americans, the African American community, is disproportionately affected by that. Is that fair to say? Is that a fair recap of what you just said?
Again, this is my humble opinion. I am, not in any way a subject matter expert, but when I look at all the data, when I look at the numbers, and I look at what separates those demographics from one another, and that is the one where you have Asians, Hispanics, natives, whose family dynamic is intact, and you have that accountability within the household. Yeah, that to me is a huge issue, and if we could quit celebrating certain aspects of you know how women are viewed in the rap culture, or whatever, like I know I'm kind of going off base here, and start promoting these men who are incredible fathers, incredible husbands in that community, and start giving them a bigger platform on what it takes to be a real man. I think those numbers would shift significantly.
I don't think what you just said is controversial. I think that that
Oh,
message
it will be, man.
well, everything is, right. Everything is to anybody that's trying to further a political agenda these days.
Yeah.
But there's an organization we support here in San Diego called Boys to Men. It was actually formed, not the band. It was formed around the time the group was formed. But
That was
they
my
go
first CD when I was a kid, Boys to Men.
well, they go into schools and they say, "Hey, give us your top 5 or 6 troublemakers, and we're going to put them through this program." And they give them, they find mentors for them. They put them through a series of obstacles. They take boys and turn them into men. They help them accomplish things. They help them get rid of anger. They help them be better people. And it's amazingly successful. He
Love
showed,
that.
yeah, it's great. He showed the founder, who's a really great guy, showed me a statistic. Something like 83% of the kids that go through his program, the boys are all boys, that go through his program were fatherless, and that's not a coincidence. That's a trend. So I don't think what you're saying is controversial. Let me ask you this though. So Black Lives Matter. I mean, we've all seen, you're okay. So you're law enforcement. You're anti-bully, which is something I really can relate to. I just hate bullies myself, and I really appreciate that the way you phrase it and what you do with your life to live that. When is there a part of you that can relate to Black Lives Matter when they show footage of a police officer, using extreme force on someone? Is there a piece? Where is there any overlap? Is there anything about Black Lives Matter where you go, yeah, you know what? I kind of see what they're saying. I can empathize with them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. When I see those instances, it's heartbreaking to me. Like, and I can see the anger, I can see the hurt, and I know that it's real, and I know that these incidents are, need to be met with the full force of the law. And I'm never going to be anti anything. For me, when I take in the totality of the information, if I really want to see that community thrive, I can't support a movement that calls for the dissolvement of the nuclear family. But when you're talking about, law enforcement, again, I'm a stats and figures kind of guy. This was another very controversial point in my speech. There are nearly 400 million interactions with law enforcement annually within these communities. In 2019, there were 9 unarmed Black men who were killed. Each one as tragic as the previous, and I in no way minimize that. But that is not police brutality. That is a false narrative. These are isolated incidents that are exacerbated by the media. And working in law enforcement for a number of years, seeing the tremendous amount of good every single day, just brilliant things that are done by people who are running in to help these communities, help these people that you'll never hear about and never be on media because it's not divisive enough, and that's what sells tickets. When you look at the crime rates in every major city across the country, 95% of African Americans are homicides come at the hands of another African American, 3.7% at the hands of law enforcement, 3.2% being a justified use of force. So you are essentially burning down your city in these protests over less than 0.5% of the deaths that are from within your community. Like that's to me, that doesn't fit the narrative of police brutality. And I know, again, these are topics that I articulate, and I am completely raped for over the media. I'm again not pulling the victimhood mentality card. That's not at all what I'm saying. As I'm just saying that I'm going based off of the FBI statistics from that year, and that's how I formulate my positions. Is I look at it objectively, I take in all the data and all the information, and I make a decision accordingly. And I don't feel like I should be judged by that either. That doesn't make me empathetic to these tragedies that transpire within those communities, and that's something I would go and march right alongside them for any day of the week. It's. But I also have to be loyal to and advocate for the men and women who put that uniform on, who don't know if they're going to come home to their loved ones at the end of the day, and who continuously go into the fight, running into the fire when everybody else is running out. And these are the people again who need to be celebrated, and the people who abuse that authority and abuse that badge need to be held to a standard that strikes fear to anybody that's wanting to go into law enforcement in order to abuse their power and prey on these communities that are in fear of what their interactions with law enforcement could be.
I think you just said a whole lot. Life was a lot less complicated playing soccer and golf breeze, wasn't it?
Yeah. And I don't know exactly what the viewership is here, but I guarantee that I will have, if people look for me, I'm going to have a bunch of hate mail for saying what I just said right there. But the thing that I want to really reiterate is, man, I will fight right alongside any injustice that I see. I will support that movement any way I can, but it has to be just. And when I see this, really a war on, like you said, on the thin blue line, that's the wrong direction, in my humble opinion.
All right. Okay. Well, let's what's next? Let's wrap it up here. What's the next year going to look like for you, Seth?
I would have had a very definitive answer for you a week ago. After my life kind of got turned upside down for stating a lot of the same things I just stated here, which they called for me to apologize for and to erase and all that, which my apology letter was, I will never apologize for this. So, because I do feel like I'm fighting for people who are being persecuted all over the world, and in a number of different capacities, and I'm never going to stop that. So a lot of my contracts have kind of gone away for now, and even though I loathe the idea of it, I really am considering a move into the political realm.
What would that look like?
So I've had a meeting. I've had a number of meetings actually. The last meeting was really depending on the redistricting and where I live and which offices they feel like I'd be a good fit in. But they feel with my credentials and experience that there's really not an office that's too ambitious to pursue. I don't have any career ambitions there. I just want to be a voice for the voiceless. I want to represent the people who are too afraid to have a voice nowadays, and I want to bring some ferocity in that environment, because I think there's cowardice on both sides of the aisle, and I think there's a complete lack of representation from a warrior class, which is a selfless warrior class, and replacing these self-serving politicians with people who are going to put the people first, and that's something that I don't know if that's the route God has for me in my life, but I do want to serve my country in the greatest capacity that I can, and the people of all walks of life, all demographics, all races, religions, creeds, and I feel like that's kind of the best option for me now, given the amount of my inability to do what I'm passionate about, and that's freeing slaves, which I would put forth a lot of policy to combat human trafficking as well.
Wow. All right. Well, then we might see you out on the campaign trail. I want to encourage everybody to look out for all the things that you're going to be doing with Turning Point. And Seth, I really appreciate this conversation. I thought it was this is amazing. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope you can make it out to San Diego and If you do, let's go have a beer and a sandwich, man. What do you say?
I would love that, brother. And I can't thank you enough for what you do and for being a voice for people who are losing that, on the verge of losing that liberty as well, man. So thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Awesome job.
Thanks for watching our Magnum show, where we dig into gun owners' topics a little more in depth. You can watch us live every Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. California time, right here on our YouTube channel, or if you're in the San Diego area, you can listen to us on 1170 a.m. We're also available on your favorite podcast platform for free. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can help restore and protect the Second Amendment, not just in California, but across the country.